Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to talk about the causes of the Great Depression. So the economy is in trouble. We just covered the 1920s, or roaring 1920s. During this time, even though it looked like everybody was having a good time, there's a time of change, a lot of prosperity, a lot of money going around. In reality, it was all fake. It was a fake prosperity of the 1920s. So even though it looked like in the 1920s people had money and people were prosperous, many industries in reality were struggling. For example, the coal industry, the steel industry, agriculture like farms, and railroads. They were barely making any money to survive. So even though it looked like the 1920s were roaring, was a good time, a lot of money, a lot of investments, a lot of technology, that was not the case for a lot of industries. It was all fake. One of the groups that we're going to specifically focus on are farmers. Farmers were in trouble even before the 1920s. So during World War I, remember World War I was from 1914 to 1918. During this time, the demand for crops increased. There was a lot of, the government was buying a lot of crops from farmers to feed the soldiers, to fund the war, and it was a good time to be a farmer during World War I. So what farmers did is, hey, the government is buying all this crop from us, all this corn, all these beans, all these crops. We need to invest more and expand. So farmers took out loans to expand and meet the demands that the government was asking of them. So because there was a demand for crops, farmers decided to take out loans, sometimes on their farms, and expand their farms. However, wars end, and after the war was over, after World War I was over, the demand for crops decreased. The problem was now is that the farmers had to pay back those loans. So a way that they decided to pay it back is, we're just going to continue to overproduce, grow more corn, grow more beans, grow more crops, and overproduce. Hopefully that will make things better. So that was their solution. We have to pay back these loans. Let's continue to grow in the same way that we were during the war, and hopefully it'll even out. It did not. Because of overproduction and because they needed to pay back those loans, many farmers went bankrupt. Many farms went bankrupt, and they lost everything, and they lost absolutely everything, and they couldn't pay back the banks the money that they had let them borrow. So demand for crops increased during World War I. After the war, the demand for crops decreased. Also during this time, another problem that was during this time was living on credit. Many people were living beyond their means. What does that mean? That they were buying stuff that they could not afford. So if you have a certain amount of income that you could spend, people thought it was easy to take out credit cards and put it on credit. So yes, I don't have the money to buy it right now, but if I put it on credit, I could still have that nice car, that nice washing machine, that nice refrigerator for my house. So they were living beyond what they could afford, beyond their means. Buying on credit became a thing. Buy now, pay later was a mentality of the 1920s. People were spending more money than they actually had. Another reason why the causes of the Great Depression was laissez-faire government. What is laissez-faire? Laissez-faire basically means that the government does not interfere with businesses, which led to a lot of businesses taking risks. So laissez-faire is a French word that means hands off. And it basically means that the government is going to let businesses do whatever they want. If banks want to loan billions of dollars to a family that makes minimum wage, that's their business. So because of that, businesses were taking higher risk, which eventually caused a lot of people to not be able to pay back those loans, and it caused further trouble in the future. So laissez-faire policies, the governments are hands off. Businesses, you do your thing. We're not going to interfere. And of course, uneven sharing of income. What does that basically mean? During the 1920s, yes, it looked like there was a lot of money going around because of new inventions, new technologies, but in reality, the rich got richer, and the poor got poorer. The richest 1% income, they rose 75%, which means that during the 1920s, rich people were making 75% more money than they did before. Whereas 70% of Americans in total, like the rest that are not rich, live below the poverty line. They were barely making enough to survive. So they were forced to live on credit, what I mentioned before. On top of that, wages remained stagnant, which basically means that people were not making more money. All the money went to the top 1%. There was a huge income inequality in the 1920s. Because of this, eventually the crash happened. What was the crash? People dreamed of getting rich. So what they did is that they invested in the stock market, where you put money down for a company and you're a part owner. So if that company is doing good, then you're doing good as well. So for example, the Apple company, if you invest in the Apple company, you're getting and Apple company does good, that means that you're a part owner, so you're also getting rich. So you invest in the stock market. During the 1920s, the economy was in a bull market. What is a bull market? A bull market is a period of rising stock prices. That means that everything on the outside looks good, the economy is roaring, everybody's employed, there's money going around, people are spending money, the economy is good. A bull market is a good economy. People began buying on margin though. What does that mean? Is that because they have this dream of getting rich, what they ended up doing was, I don't have money to buy stock in the Apple company, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow money from the bank, and then once I start making money from the Apple company, I'm going to pay back the bank. So they were borrowing money that they did not have. They were buying on margin so that they could buy stock and get rich. That became a problem. On October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday happened, which basically was this. The stock market crashed. The stock market crashed, which meant that a lot of people, the stock markets grew very, very low, which signaled the start of the Great Depression. The price of Apple plummeted, which means that now that stock is not making any money, so how am I going to pay the bank back? The bank back. So Black Tuesday was the day that the stock market crashed, October 29, 1929. The financial collapse. So after all of these factors kind of came into being, the financial collapse happened, where 11,000 out of the 2,500 banks in the United States failed. That means that 1 in 3 banks failed. The average person who didn't even invest in the stock market lost all of their life savings, and banks, because the banks also invested in the stock market. So for example, let's say that I'm a teacher and I don't invest in the stock market because I don't understand it. It's too complicated. I don't know what to do. But I have all of my money in the bank. Because all of my money is in the bank and the bank did invest in the stock market, all of my life savings are gone. So even if I didn't invest in the stock market, my bank where I had my money did, so they lost all of my money. And back then, this was before we had any money, any protection, so all that money was just lost. On top of that, people lost jobs and unemployment went from 3% to 25% in 1933. That means that 1 in every 4 person was out of a job. 1 in every 4 workers lost their job. To make things a little bit worse, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act happened, which was a tax on suppliers from other countries. It was passed as a way to hey, we're going to tax anything that's not made in the United States so that people just buy American stuff. It was meant to that the U.S. government passed this Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act to help small businesses in the United States, but it actually made things worse because once we made other countries' stuff more expensive, other countries retaliated and did the same thing to our stuff. So we were selling less American stuff abroad. So the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act made things worse. So what were the 4 causes of the Great Depression? Laissez-faire policies, the government hands off. They pretty much let businesses do whatever they want, which caused them to take risks that were unnecessary. The farm sector and overproduction. They were overproducing crops, which caused a drought and also caused farmers to lose their homes and go bankrupt. Their farms and go bankrupt. Easy credit, the availability of credit made people live beyond their means, so they were living lives that they could not afford. And income inequality. People were making, the income in the United States was not equal in the United States. Rich people were getting richer and poor people were getting poorer.